everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Talking Acquisition. This is the weekly, high-energy, informative, and slightly opinionated view on all things acquisition, procurement, and federal contracting related. This is the place where the contracting, the acquisition communities, and our industry partners connect, talk, listen, and learn from each other. My name is William Randolph, and I'm your host, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, my colleague, my partner, and dear friend, Soraya Carrera. Hello, Soraya. How you doing?
Hello, Will. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. We're back at it.
Yes, we're. Yes, we are. All right. Let's go through our disclaimer, and then I'm going to let you introduce our topic. So our podcast shares information and views on a variety of topics that impact the federal acquisition community. Our goal is to provide thought leadership and perspective, not to criticize, judge, or render political opinions, although a few might slip out. We provide this free service because we are former federal acquisition professionals and leaders. We believe that the creativity, innovation, and effectiveness of our community is unleashed when we share knowledge, information, and learning. We hope you enjoy our podcast, and we welcome the views and comments of our colleagues across the private and public sectors. So, Will, what would you like to chat about this week?
Soraya, I got something that's a little juicy.
All
A little
right.
juicy. Okay. So I read an article probably 3 or 4 days ago, and I'll give you the title of the article. Key cyber agency set to get procurement authority / contracting officers. It's like, clickbait. If you wanted me to read something, that was it. So what I read was CISA, a component within DHS, is actually getting contracting authority, having an ACA established, and then putting a contract shop together. And it just went to my head. It was like, all the things, I've never had the opportunity to build from scratch a contracting shop. So I just wanted to talk about the idea, the concept behind laying all the blocks and laying all the bricks and all this foundation work. And then what does it take to build an effective contracting shop? Something tells me you might have had some experience in this once or twice in your career.
Yeah, I think I've done it once or twice. Well, actually, it's a great topic. And first, let me talk a little bit about CISA, just a little bit of background, because I saw the article and it's a great article. CISA was the old National Protection and Programs Director, and I think it was called NPPD when DHS was first stood up. And then it became the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. And they are a component of DHS. They've been established as a component. They've been getting a budget. Their budget has been growing in leaps and bounds. And so they've had to restructure, right? They had to come from the old NPPD to become CISA. Some things went away, some things got pulled in there. And then they had to look at their management structure. What is their HR, their IT, and all that good stuff. And they've done a really good job of working on that restructuring. And they've been working in partnership with the management, or at least from my perspective, with the management director at headquarters. And when they approached me about setting up their contracting shop, I said, well, okay, but it ain't about just hiring a bunch of COs. Okay?
Right.
So that's usually the initial thinking.
Reaction.
Everybody, this is true for everybody. It's not unique to CISA. Everybody goes, oh, well, I'll just get a couple of COs, give them a few warrants, and away we go. Nope, don't work that way. First, because these contracting officers need the structure and the discipline of an organization that tells them, here's what we are doing. And so I always say, start with the leadership. The most important element of any organization that you're established, whether you're establishing a head of contracting activity, a new division, or a chief of contracting office, whatever you're trying to do, you got to start with that leadership. You got to have somebody who says, here's what we're going to do. Here's the path we're going to lay out. And under that, what you got to start thinking about is, who is my customer? What is my customer? And the reason I say you got to think about the customers, because that's going to tell you how you're going to structure your organization. Right? So yes, of course, you're going to have an operational division. And in that operational division, you're going to have units. That's your contracting team. The people who are actually going to go out and write contracts, solicit, evaluate proposals, and award contracts and administer them. That's your operational group. So that you're going to do, and that should be formulated along the lines of, what is your customer? What do they buy? How do they buy, right? There's many ways to do that, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But in addition to that, you got to think about all the support that those people need, because they need support. So you're going to need policy and procedures. You're going to need people who help them define what are the policies and procedures that are unique to that organization, that HCA, that customer. And believe you me, when you work in an agency like DHS, where you have a hodgepodge of services and missions, you have law enforcement, you have security, you have IT, you have HR. There's differences, there's subtle differences. A benefits granting agency has different procedures and processes than a law enforcement organization. And even between the law enforcement organizations, the processes can vary. So you have to think about that customer. What are you buying for them? How do you buy? So you got to do all that homework. You got to look at the data, figure out what you're going to do, so you can decide how operationally you're going to look. So now let's talk about who's going to support them. Well, you're going to need some policy folks. Maybe initially you might only need a handful, maybe one or two, but you're going to need policy folks to help get those policies together, look at what the mothership provides, i.e. the senior procurement executive, and then do you have to tailor anything down from there, right? Then you're going to need systems people, because even if you're using the same system, you got to have people to train your people on how to use the systems and how to adapt them to what you're trying to do. So you're going to need your systems people. You're probably going to need one or two oversight or quality control. Call them whatever you want. In some divisions, I think in OPO, when we were there, we called it quality assurance. In other places, we call them oversight. Whatever you want to call it, it's the people who support them in doing their job better. And I say that very carefully. When I use the word oversight, I talk about supportive oversight, which is quality assurance. It's making sure that you're doing the job right, that if we see any patterns where you're doing certain documents wrong or whatever, then we offer you that support and assistance to make sure you get it right before others show up to tell you what to do right. And then you're going to need workforce management folks, people who help you manage your workforce. And by that, I don't mean HR people. I mean people who understand what it takes to be an acquisition professional.
Right.
What are your certs, your training, so that they can help you make sure that you have the right training plan for the people that are working for you. So those are like the key essential elements. Certainly, you need to think about innovation and creativity, especially with the PRICE Act having recently been passed. And you got to think about industry engagement and how you want to do that, whether you want separate positions to do that, or you're going to use your team. You need to think about things like strategic sourcing and category management. But those are things that can be done within some of these other functions. I'm not saying they have to be called out separately. But the most important question that a good leader has to ask themselves is, what is my culture going to be in this?
I was waiting because that's
you
where
knew I was
going.
So I'll stop there and let you.
That's exactly where I want to land. You know, in my career, I've had a couple of opportunities to come in as the director of contracts. And what I have realized is that you inherit a culture. Now, it may not be the one you want, but you have one. When you walk in the door, there is one. And I've always imagined the opportunity to create a culture from scratch. And what I mean by culture is like a buying culture. What is the culture of our organization? How are we going to look at customer service? What's our customer experience going to be built and build it from scratch? What are the contract tools, contract vehicles that we're going to lend? What is our inclination? What type of contracting do we use? And to your point, your customer base and your existing spend, because that spend has been happening somewhere. So going out and corralling it and then doing an analysis of it will allow you to think about how you're going to build the culture around serving that new entity. But I truly think building a culture from scratch, then once you have that, then that will inform your recruitment and hiring strategy, because you'll start looking for the people that will match the skill sets and the way you plan to come to the marketplace from a service provider perspective. You'll go look for, and it will inform how you will go look for the individuals to fit into that system. So yeah, I think the culture piece is just amazing. And in my head, it's just like, it's all Play-Doh. It's not a Rubik's Cube that it's like, okay, there's one solution.
You're going to adjust.
Has to go fix one solution. It's almost a big glob of Play-Doh.
And you're adjusting
as you go.
You're constantly, so here's what I was going to say. So culture plays in two places. Culture plays the moment you decide that you're going to create an organization. That's why I said you got to think about your customer needs. You got to think about what is that operational unit going to look like? Because initially you'll have all this data coming at you and you're not going to have time, because here's the thing, the train is still moving.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Right.
As
right.
you're building it, that train
Right.
is moving. Right? As you're like slapping new paint on it and all that stuff. So you got to be careful. So you do want to do your analysis, but you're doing that analysis as you go. So you got to start from somewhere. So, but you got to start thinking about that culture from the moment you walk through the door. I think that a good leader is thinking about customer, culture, and employee experience, right? Because all three experiences are extremely important. That customer experience, the employee's experience, and what that culture is going to be to support those two. Because if you don't have good customer experience and good employee experience, you're not going to have a good organization. That's just about, I don't care how much you stand up and preach on the pulpit about how great and wonderful your people are. Ain't going to work. Your people will see through you. So you have to be thinking about that from the beginning. And then as you collect your data, you're going to be adjusting for that culture. And your first group of people that you're going to hire have to be people who can adapt to a changing environment. So you want to bring people that aren't set in their ways, the people who are smart, talented, and capable, but also willing to learn and try new things. Those are the kinds of people you kind of want to start your organization with. That doesn't mean you don't need to bring some of those folks that perhaps bring you stability. You know, I always say there's the A player, the B player, the C player. Usually don't want D's and F's, right? And I'm using school grading scale. That A player is your superstar, right? That's the person that does everything, is great and wonderful, walks on water, and probably gives you a headache every now and then. That's okay. That's what they're supposed to do.
That's what A's do.
That's what A's do. We give headaches, right? B's are those people that don't really give you as much of a headache, and they're a little bit more flexible and a little bit more willing to try something different and willing to work with those A's and say, I really would like to be an A, but I don't have to be an A every day, right?
Sure.
And then there are C's, and there are people that have criticized me when I say you need a few C's in your organization. Because how in the hell do you know you have B's and A's if you don't have any C's?
Fair enough.
Just kidding. No, just kidding. But no, C's I think are stabilizers. They're the people that typically they don't want to be radical. They don't want to be great. They want to come in and do the job.
Do their A and go home.
Well, right? They want to do their job well and then go home at the end of the day. It's good to have some people like that.
Absolutely.
Because they remind us that we don't have to work 24/7. They remind us that these are human beings. So I always say A's, B's, and C's. Also, I just think it's a little egotistical to have all A's and B's and not have any C's in your organization. That just says you're not opening the door and giving opportunity for C's to become B's and A's.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I really think that you have to think about that culture that you want to build, but you got to be constantly thinking about what's that experience of the customer, what's the employee engagement. And that goes to the structure of the organization. So now let's talk about the operational unit for a moment. There's like a zillion ways you can structure your operational unit. You can divide it along customer lines, right? Because you have customers within like a CISA, they have divisions. Well, you can align according to those divisions, but you might create the haves and have-nots. Because for example, if I look at headquarters, I'm thinking about in Office of Procurement Operations, the CIO is a huge buyer. It's a huge buyer. So what, I set up a division just for the CIO? Am I leaving somebody out? Maybe, right? Am I going to get where are people
opportunity from an opportunity perspective?
Right. Where are people going to want to work, right? So you have to think about those things. You got to think about how you want to do your procurements. Are you going to have divisions that are cradle to grave? In other words, they do all the pre-award and post-award work. So they award the contracts and administer them within that group. Or do you create a separate contract administration team? This was a battle I used to have with a couple of my deputies, right? When I was HCA, I had deputies that sometimes wanted a separate contract admin. I would say, no, I want cradle to grave. And I'll tell you why I like cradle to grave. I liked cradle to grave because I think that when you know you have to manage that contract, you're a little bit more meticulous up front, I think. And you bring your lessons learned in from administration into your pre-award. That's my opinion. But I also recognize that depending on the contract and how complex or confusing it might be worthwhile to have a separate contract admin. So, but you have to think about that. That goes right back to customer. What is it that the customer does? And when you think about the customer, it's not just about what they need, what they buy. How talented is your customer? How knowledgeable and versed are they
Yeah.
in the acquisition process?
Acquisition savvy.
Right.
Yeah.
How well do they know how to write requirements, which we know that's kind of a tough art. How do they know how to write, how to engage with industry? How to prepare eval criteria? How to evaluate proposals, right? Those are things that you have to think about, because that is going to fall on your procurement team to
Sure.
help that customer. And the more help they need, then that means you got to be thinking about how you're going to assign work within that team so that they can
Two
support.
jobs. They got two jobs in there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And even your customer, you know, getting like information into the system and knowing how to
Yep.
retrieve that, and all these things, right? You got to be thinking about. And so that's why I think it's really important that that top individual comes in with the right knowledge, experience, but also that right customer service and employee engagement skill.
Yeah.
I think that's the most critical position. Once you get that person in, they start to form the organization. And will they stub their toe? Of course they will. I made mistakes when I was standing up organizations. There were things that I would do and I go, "Now, why in the hell did I do that?" Right? But you course correct, right?
Yeah,
But
yes,
once you
absolutely.
start to build your team, what you can do is start grabbing feedback from your team
Right.
as well as your customer as you go along.
Yeah.
And so I've always had a very customer oriented model where I try to lean in towards like what the customer buys, how they buy,
Yeah.
what they think they know, what they don't know. I try to lean in that direction always, that, you know, kind of shape around the customer. But there have been times that I've taken my support infrastructure, my policy, my oversight, my pricing. I forgot to mention pricing people, which fall under the policy and oversight, workforce management. And I've sometimes tweaked those teams
Yeah.
because of the needs of the operational and the customer.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things places I want to go next, Soraya, is the policy, regulatory best practices kind of foundation.
Mhm.
I think if you're building something from whole, and I've never had the opportunity, so I'm just assuming you're building something from whole cloth. One strategy would be, look, I'm going to build the whole thing from whole cloth, and I'm going to design it all. And the alternative is look around and see a mature model that you'd like to borrow some stuff from, maybe something higher up in the organization. If you're building a new sliver, maybe there are some brothers or sisters on the side and said, maybe I could borrow some things from them. My mind goes back to the earlier days when I joined DHS. There was a large contingent of Treasury and Navy. Right. You know, like there were two families of kind of theories, but they were solid anchors, if you will, that they weren't building stuff from whole cloth. It was like it was a Treasury IRS way, and then there was kind of the Navy way for kind of what I like to think is like some of the other areas that was doing higher level like development platform stuff, ships, boats, that kind of stuff. They use the Navy model, but what I'm getting to is, I think they borrowed that instead of building it all from whole cloth, they took blocks and said, let's just take this block and use this, and then you can actually bring some people in along those lines to help solidify that as you then build a new culture. But it has some DNA of some other more mature areas.
It would be suicidal to try to build it from scratch. First of all, because you're just not going to have the time. That you never have enough staff to do that. But second of all, why would you? Why would you go and tap into those that have done it before you and grab their lessons learned as well as what they've done? There's nothing wrong with mimicking another organization, especially if that organization is doing well. What I always say is try not to mimic too much, because what I saw with the startup of DHS, and sometimes we lean too heavily into this is how DOD did it, or this is how Treasury did it, or this is, and I got to tell you, that little commentary gets old really damn fast.
I didn't mean to bring up any PSTD.
Oh no, yeah, no, I still suffer from it. You see me going crazy. No, and seriously, I used to tell people careful with that, right? Because those go read the newspaper, you're gonna find an article about all of them, right? It's right.
Yeah,
It's just like nobody's
absolutely.
perfect, right? But when people do that, the people that don't come from that organization, like, oh, well, I came out of them, and you get that. So what you want to do is grab the best of each and say, we're going to bring it all together. We're going to create us. I was very fond of always reminding people, we're going to take the best of Treasury, the best of Commerce, the best of INS, the best of
Yes.
whatever it was.
Wherever it came
And we're
from.
going to create who we are going to be.
Yeah.
And we're going to create, and then people are going to come and mimic us, right?
Yes.
But grab
Which
the
has
best.
happened. Which has happened.
But you would never
Absolutely.
want to start from scratch. The only advice that I would give, and it was something that I worked very hard, and it was difficult because it's easy to get lulled into doing too much. Less is more. Just because they have this hierarchy and they do this way,
Oh, yeah.
go look at the flexibilities that are available to you. So you
Right.
build it very streamlined from the beginning. Because there were a couple times when I was looking at certain business processes and we were reevaluating, and I go, well, why are we doing this? Well, this is the way they always did it. And I
Yeah.
go, yeah,
I
but why
remember
are we
I
doing
remember
this?
those.
Well, because this is the way they always did it. I go, well, why
I
do we
remember
do
those-
it this way?
I
Or my
remember those years.
favorite, right? This guy has to sign it. This guy has to sign it.
Right.
This guy, whatever, has to sign it, right? And I go, well, why are they looking at it? What's their value proposition? Well, I don't know. They always looked at it, and I go, why? And when people can't answer a why with a legitimate answer, I go, okay, let's not send it over there and see what happens.
Yeah, agreed.
I did that a couple of times. I did, and I got in trouble once for doing that. Yeah, the person came to see me and said,
Of
I
course
understand
did.
you haven't been sending, requisitions to my office for review or whatever the heck it was that I wasn't doing. And I went, yeah, but I stopped that like about 6 months ago. You
Yeah,
just start
And
figuring
life
it out.
continued.
Maybe you don't need to be looking at this, right? But my point is that you have to be thoughtful about this, right?
Yeah.
Because the first thing that you want to try to build your organization in a way that gives it credibility,
Yes.
but also shows that you're trying to be as efficient and effective as you can. If you just pile bureaucracy onto it, especially this day and age, people are going to catch that and you're going to get resistors. You're going to get resistors within your organization as well across your customer base and even in from the hierarchy above. There are a couple of times, at least I can speak for me, where I would call an HCA and go, why the hell are y'all doing this way? And they would go, wow, and I go, why are you doing it this way? I'm not telling you to do it that way. Who is driving you to do this? I don't even want to see this way, right? And they were like, it was some bureaucracy that they built within themselves to check themselves. And I'm like, well, you're giving me a headache.
Yeah, don't do that.
Because it's causing me to have to do X, Y, Z. So I very intentionally try to dissuade people from building too much oversight, too much bureaucracy. You got to be very careful with that. And I got to emphasize the innovation, the creativity is extremely important. That feedback from your employees to say, are we going in the right direction? What do you think? They're touching the customer every day. Yep. So you got to get some feedback from them, right? And you got to make them buy into, you want them to buy into the organization. So that feedback is extremely important. And then that industry engagement piece. Any more?
I love it.
If you don't have some kind of policy procedure set up to regularly communicate and engage with the industry, you're missing a great opportunity because that's where the partnerships are really built.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. The last point I want to bring up, Soraya, is relationships. That I think the connections when building or when rebuilding or reimagining, that the glue or the mortar in between the bricks of the thing that you're building is relationships. I think there could be great value in leveraging existing working professional, whatever relationships look like. I think borrowing from those relationships, leveraging those relationships could be very helpful in rebuilding, or in most cases, we find ourselves at reconstituting a contract shop. Leverage the relationships. There are people who have worked together, have been in the trenches together. They trust each other. So it's a trust component there. I think there's some value there.
Sure. So one of the things that I very typically, you heard me say, employee engagement, customer experience. The two most valuable relationships you're going to have, that doesn't count all the other, you're going to have a gazillion relationships, but you got to get with that customer and understand what they are, who they are, what are they looking for, what do they need, everybody comes in with an anecdotal story about procurement. If I had a nickel for every anecdotal story, I wouldn't be here, because I'd be a billionaire. I'd be buying Twitter. I'm kidding. So anyway, but everybody comes in with that story. So the first thing you want to do is kind of understand where the mindset of your customer is, because it is your job, like it or not, to try to get rid of that mentality that they have. Try to help them see that it is much better than that one little story that they've been telling for the last 50 years. Okay, 20. Okay, so it's better than that one story, right? Similarly, that's true for your employees.
Yeah.
You need to build that relationship as they're coming through the door. They need to see their leadership in action. They need to know their leader is their champion, their cheerleader, their most ardent supporter. If they're not feeling that from the beginning, trust me, turbulent times are coming. Anytime you're building anything, you're changing anything, you're reconstituting, whatever language you want to use, turbulent times are coming. Somebody's going to be questioning it. Somebody's going to be challenging it. Somebody's going to be critiquing it, because everybody knows how to do it better than you do, right? So build those relationships with that customer and those employees from the very beginning. Get their feedback, talk to them, listen to them, get their ideas. They have ideas. They may not all be perfect, but get their ideas and start machinating them and having regular conversations with them. First, that tells them that you're serious about caring for their needs. Remember what I said, take care of your customer, take care of your employee, the rest of it does take care of itself.
Yeah, good stuff.
The second reason I raise that is a word that you and I love to use whenever we talk about leadership: trust. How do you build trust? You build trust through communication.
Right.
Talking to people, listening to them, telling them what you're going to do, and then doing what you said you're going to do, and making sure that they recognize when you make a mistake, that you recognize you made a mistake, right? So that's really a critical component, is building that relationship. I didn't throw industry in there yet, but that's why I said industry engagement is just as important, because you got to get that customer and that employee, and then you and them together got to build that relationship with your industry, whoever your industry is. Hopefully you already have that, or a lot of that is already happening, because this isn't new, right? Somebody's been buying for them before, somebody's been doing the work for them before. But I think that's essentially critical. I always emphasize the communication, which I include the words engagement in that. I think communication, collaboration, coordination, right, are extremely important. And that leadership example, that leader that says, here's my vision, here are our objectives, and here are the values of our organization. Here's how we're going to run the show, right? And not be afraid to adjust. I always tell the story at DHS. I was there at the very beginning when we built the original objectives and priorities for DHS, which was quality contracting, quality people, quality something, I forgot what the heck, quality program management, and then my predecessor added quality communications with industry. That, right? Those were the 4 objectives. And I remember when I came back as the chief procurement officer, the first time I had to say those 4 objectives, I said, something wrong with this picture. I got to change it. And why did I want to change it? We already had quality people. We already had quality communications. We had quality program support, and we had quality contracts. I didn't think there was anything wrong. I said, we got that. What are we trying to achieve?
Right. What now?
Right? What now? How do we move this needle forward?
I love that.
So that's what I mean, that leaders have to think about that. What's the message they want to craft to their people? And then share that message over and over and over again. And the most important thing is, don't be afraid to admit when you stubbed your toe. It's okay. It happens. Stuff happens, man. But it's fun. I got to tell you, it's fun.
I can only imagine.
Not for the weak of heart. You know, if you're faint of heart, I don't recommend you walk inside a creative procurement organization. It's a little tough, but it's a lot of fun. It's probably one of the best experiences I've had in my life, whether I had to build it from scratch or kind of rejigger it. It's always
I've had a couple of those.
I enjoy it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Me too. Yeah, good stuff. Well, Soraya, it's about that time. I thought this one would be high energy, and it did not disappoint. It did not disappoint. So let's talk nuggets before we go.
Sure.
Let's talk nuggets. Would you like to go first?
Sure, I'd love to. So I'm going to have a couple of nuggets. I'm going to give you a nugget for the employee. I'm going to give you a nugget for the leadership of the organization, because we're talking about HCAs. And I'm going to give you a nugget for industry. Okay. So I'm going to start with the employees. You have to be adaptable. You're going to walk into an organization that's undergoing change or being created. That means you have to understand everything's not going to be perfect, but you're a part of helping make it perfect.
Yeah.
I always love to be at the ground level of an organization that was growing and changing and developing, because it does give you an opportunity to bring your best thoughts and help build the organization. So be a part of the change. Instead of running around criticizing or being upset by it, be a part of it, engage in it. Tell the bosses, here's some ideas, here's some things we could be doing better. So I encourage employees that want to do that, man, this is your opportunity. People are looking for answers. For industry, same thing. You can walk in there and criticize what they didn't do and how they didn't do the procurement, blah, blah, or you can come in and say, we had some ideas. You know, on these contracts over here, you did them this way before. Maybe we do these strategically. Here are some thoughts. Here's what we're looking at. Because you're standing up an organization. Industry knows a lot about your business. They've been bidding your contracts. They've been working it. But they should come in with their ideas, their thoughts in a helpful manner, in a positive manner, to encourage and promote the conversations with industry. And then the leadership. You got to put on your ears, man. You got to open these puppies up and listen. Listen to what they're telling you, and also listen to what they're not telling you. Because there's a lot that doesn't get said. You have to keep your finger on the pulse of the people, the customer, and the industry. And if you do those things, it's a tough balancing act, but if you do those things, you're going to have a successful HCA organization. And by the way, you know how I define a successful HCA organization? It is not by their pulse. It is not by how many people they have and all that stuff. It's about how well they come together to achieve the mission. In the moment that you need them most, how well do they do their job?
Yeah.
That's how you define an HCA organization.
I love that. I love that. I'm a dual combo nugget. I'm following your lead. I've got two nuggets. One for the employees or future employees is best practices. Wherever your best practice came from, I encourage you to bring it, but don't bring it cookie cutter, because it has to live in the environment that it sets in. Okay, so best practices, things that you've done. Please come with opinions and ideas and thoughts, but please know that there won't be just cookie cutter slamming them out. They have to be able to be morphed and tailored to the environment that they live in. And then for the leadership, always know that any brick that's laid can be taken up. Okay, just because you make a decision and you go all in on a decision does not mean that later on you get new information that says, I should have turned the brick around. The mortar can be taken out. You can change the bricks. Whatever you're building, please know. So build intentionally, but please know that the bricks can be changed.
Just one comment on that. Don't blow it up. Pull it out gracefully.
Right. Yeah, that's what I said. The brick, not the whole thing. Just know a brick can be changed.
I've seen a few people try to blow a brick up. It ain't pretty.
Now I've seen a couple places that should have been, but that's another podcast.
Yeah, but if you've got a detonator, you're like way over.
All right, and with that, thank you, Soraya. Amazing episode.
I love it. Well,
this one was fun.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Always, and thank you for taking me back to my basics. I loved when I was working on organizations. That was the thrill.
Oh, that's the best. It's literally the best. Passion. Yeah, it's the best. All right, and with that, all the best.
We'll see you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.